Oscar wins aren't always awarded to the best performances. Politics, campaigning, genre bias, timing, and sentiment often shape results more than the work itself. The real controversy is who won instead and why. Let's take it from the top. Number 1, Art Carney, Best Actor in 1975. By 1975, Carney was a beloved figure. Already a longtime character actor and TV legend, he carried decades of goodwill into Harry and Tonto, a quiet road movie about an elderly widower traveling across America with his cat. The film is gentle, kind, and intentionally small. It's about loneliness, aging, and learning how to keep moving when life has already taken so much from you. There's nothing offensive or embarrassing about the performance. In fact, it's pleasant, warm, and easy to like, and that's why he won. The thing is, the Academy didn't just reward the performance, they rewarded Carney. This win functioned as a Lifetime Achievement Award without the Academy having to admit it was giving one. He was safe, he was comforting, he represented dignity and not disruption. For voters, that mattered more than difficulty, transformation, or risk. But here's the uncomfortable question. If you watched all the nominated performances back to back, would this one really stand out? Unfortunately, the answer is no. Carney's performance is largely passive. He reacts more than he acts. The performance features minimal transformation, no demanding emotional arcs, and no moments that stretch the limits of what acting can do. It's subtle in a way that borders on inert. And then there's the emotional impact, which is mild. Not because it's poorly done, but because it never asks much of the audience or the actor. One of the strangest parts of Art Carney's win is who he beat and what kind of work lost to him. Al Pacino was nominated that year for The Godfather Part 2, delivering a performance defined by restraint, calculation, and moral decay. It's not loud. It doesn't plead for sympathy. It quietly charts a transformation of Michael Corleone into something colder and more isolated than the man we met 2 years earlier. It's disciplined, controlled, and devastating in its own way. Arguably, one of the most complex character arcs ever completed across 2 films. Jack Nicholson, meanwhile, was nominated for Chinatown, playing Jake Gittes as a man slowly realizing that intelligence and charm won't save him from a system designed to crush anyone who pushes too hard. It's a performance built on denial and delayed recognition, ending not in triumph, but helplessness. Nicholson doesn't explode here. He withholds. And that restraint is exactly what makes the final moments land so hard. So why didn't either of them win? This was because neither performance offered comfort. Pacino's Michael Corleone isn't likable. He's chilling. Nicholson's Gittes doesn't conquer evil. He's broken by it. Art Carney's Harry and Tonto, by contrast, was gentle, safe, and reassuring. It asked very little of the audience emotionally. And so in a year crowded with performances about power, corruption, and moral collapse, the Academy gravitated toward warmth and familiarity. Not the most demanding work, but the least unsettling. The reason why this victory matters is that Carney set a pattern we'll keep seeing. A pattern that shows the Academy often chooses reassurance when faced with bold, difficult performances versus safe, sentimental ones. But if this was the softest win in our list, imagine what happens when power, money, and campaigning enter the picture. Because in our next win, the stakes got higher and one man's influence got louder. Number 2, Gwyneth Paltrow, Best Actress in 1999. By the late 1990s, Miramax wasn't just a studio, it was an awards machine. Harvey Weinstein had turned Oscar campaigning into a science, and 1999 was its most aggressive year yet. Shakespeare in Love was positioned perfectly as a witty, romantic, and period prestige with just enough intelligence to feel important and just enough charm to feel accessible. And at the center of it all was Paltrow, young, luminous, and framed as the emotional heart of the film. And this wasn't accidental. Paltrow's performance is good. She's likable, graceful, and emotionally sincere. But here's the key distinction. It's pleasant, not transformative. You're never watching an actor disappear into a role. You're watching a star play a version of herself inside a cleverly written fantasy. That's not easy, but it's not the best acting of the year. That same year, Cate Blanchett delivered a commanding and risky performance in Elizabeth. The performance was physically demanding, emotionally layered, and historically grounded. She transformed completely, charting a woman's evolution into power. Also, Fernanda Montenegro in Central Station gave one of the most devastating performances of the decade. Quiet, humane, and disturbingly real. Many critics still consider it one of the greatest acting turns ever nominated. So why didn't they win? The Academy felt Blanchett was young and not yet due, while Montenegro faced the Academy's long-standing foreign language bias, with both actresses having no campaign muscle behind them. Their performances asked voters to meet the film on its own terms, without glamour or familiarity. And historically, that's a hard sell. On the other hand, Paltrow's campaign never stopped. Miramax dominated screenings, press, trade ads, and narratives. Paltrow was framed as the embodiment of youthful romance and classic Hollywood stardom, while the film itself was marketed as a love letter to storytelling. Momentum built, and once momentum takes over, quality becomes secondary. At a certain point, the question shifted from who was best to who can upset Paltrow. This marked a moment when Oscar outcomes began to look less like artistic judgment and more like a studio using its power to win. Even people who enjoyed the film sensed something was off. And that begs the question, when a performance wins because of narrative force rather than artistic force, what does that say about the award itself? Because the next case shows the Academy making mistakes while trying to correct its own past mistakes. Number 3. Al Pacino, Best Actor in 1993. The 1993 Oscar is best known for the Academy not voting on a performance but on a conscience. Al Pacino had already given some of the most influential performances in American film history. The Godfather, Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, and Justice for All. Throughout the 1970s, he lost again and again, often to safer, more traditional choices. Each loss made the Academy look worse for ignoring him, and by the time Scent of a Woman arrived, that guilt had fully accumulated. So when Pacino stormed onto the screen as Lieutenant Colonel Frank Slade, blind, bitter, and booming, the reaction wasn't subtle admiration. It was relief. The performance was loud, it was demonstrative, and most importantly, it was safe. This was the Academy's way out, but the competition that year was extraordinary. Denzel Washington in Malcolm X completely changed himself for the role physically, intellectually, and spiritually. He carried a historical figure across decades, capturing evolution rather than explosion. There was also Robert Downey Jr. in Chaplin, who gave a daring, elastic performance that balanced mimicry with vulnerability, all while anchoring a demanding biopic. So why didn't they win? Just like clockwork, Washington was deemed too soon, a phrase that has quietly cost multiple performers their moment. Downey, brilliant as he was, lacked Pacino's accumulated narrative weight. Neither performance offered the Academy a way to ease its guilt. Pacino did, which was why he won. It was deemed his time. Rewarding Pacino here allowed the Academy to correct decades of neglect in one clean gesture. But to be clear, Pacino is not the problem. He's magnetic in the role, committed, and undeniably entertaining. But the performance itself is theatrical to the point of excess. It's built on volume, repetition, and broad emotional swings. The famous speeches are memorable, but they'll overwhelm the quieter moments. I love Pacino, and I'm not even against him having an Oscar. But the Academy didn't just honor him. It failed him first and then failed again trying to fix it. This win broke a kind of trust. It made something explicit that audiences had long suspected. Sometimes Oscars are awarded for history, not the year in front of them. The irony is painful. Pacino should have won earlier. Dog Day Afternoon, maybe even The Godfather Part 2. But by waiting, the Academy turned his Oscar into a compromise instead of a celebration. They stained his legacy by making his only Oscar a controversial one. And once popularity and legacy start outweighing precision, another pattern takes hold. Because if performance becomes secondary to how much people love you, what happens next? Number 4, Sandra Bullock, Best Actress in 2010. By the time The Blind Side arrived in 2009, Sandra Bullock wasn't just a movie star, she was America's favorite. The film became a massive commercial hit, pulling in audiences far beyond the usual Oscar crowd. At the same time, Bullock was riding a rare career moment with a romantic comedy hit earlier that year, a public-facing comeback narrative, and a reputation as one of the most likable figures in Hollywood. Everything lined up perfectly for her, and that matters, because her win the following year wasn't really about difficulty, it was about goodwill. So what exactly was the goodwill? The audience loved her. Her story felt uplifting and safe. And because the Academy often gravitates toward performances that reassure rather than challenge, Bullock's performance as Lee Ann Tuohy is confident, warm, and charismatic. She's completely watchable, but the role itself doesn't demand any deep transformation. Much of the performance leans on personality, timing, charm, and presence rather than technical range or emotional risk. It's effective in the moment. Walking out of the theater at the time, I remember thinking she was solid, but on a rewatch, there was nothing remotely Oscar-defining, and that's the core issue here. Bullock's case is where popularity quietly replaced evaluation. When award season rolled around and she started winning everything, it felt less like momentum building and more like inevitability taking over. Was anyone really asking whether this was the year's most demanding performance? Meanwhile, the competition told a very different story. Gabourey Sidibe in Precious delivered a raw, fearless debut, emotionally exposed, physically vulnerable, and completely unguarded. Carey Mulligan in An Education animation carried an entire film through subtle shifts in maturity and self-awareness. Even Meryl Streep in Julie and Julia, a lighter role, demonstrated precision and control that went far beyond surface appeal. So why didn't they win? Sidibe was a newcomer, and the subject matter of Precious was deeply uncomfortable. It was exactly the kind of performance the Academy often praises in theory, but avoids in practice. Add to that her not meeting the Oscars' definition of Best Actress. She stood no chance. Mulligan's work, on the other hand, was quiet, internal, and easy to underestimate. Finally, neither came with the protective cushion of star power that Bullock did. We have shown why the win was undeserved, but why did the win age so poorly? Time. As time passed, people began to question the film's message, and without that emotional framing, the performance no longer carried the same weight. What once felt inspiring now feels thin, and her win leaves a lingering question. If safety and affection become deciding factors, how often do braver performances get left behind? Because the next level shows what happens when comfort isn't enough, and spectacle takes over. Number 5, Roberto Benigni, Best Actor, 1999. When Life is Beautiful broke through internationally, it didn't arrive quietly. It arrived as an event. The film's tonal gamble of mixing slapstick comedy with the Holocaust was unlike anything most audiences had seen. Roberto Benigni wasn't just a star, he was the experience. His energy, his physicality, and his unfiltered emotion spilled off the screen and into the awards season itself. So if it was that great, why shouldn't Benigni have won? Because in his case, the performance overwhelmed the material. It's over the top as it is constantly reaching outward and demanding attention. For some viewers, that's powerful. For others, it's excessive and tonally jarring, especially given the historical subject matter. Also widely reported at the time and since was the role of Miramax and Harvey Weinstein in pushing the film hard. This was the same year Gwyneth Paltrow benefited from Miramax's peak influence. Weinstein had effectively rewritten the modern Oscar campaign playbook: massive ad buys, constant events, and targeted outreach. For Life is Beautiful, Benigni reportedly relocated to Los Angeles during voting season, attending nightly Miramax-hosted parties designed to keep him top of mind. Critics at the time openly questioned whether the campaigning overwhelmed the actual evaluation. That same year, Edward Norton in American History X delivered a harrowing, physically and psychologically transformative performance, one that confronted hatred head-on without softening it. Even more controversially, Sir Ian McKellen, widely seen as a frontrunner for Gods and Monsters, later claimed Weinstein rigged the race. McKellen has stated that Weinstein eventually apologized to him directly, saying, and I quote, "I do apologize for stealing the Oscar from you. Whether you take that literally or symbolically, it speaks to how tainted this win feels in hindsight. It also raises a question that still matters. How much campaigning is too much?" Next, we move from subterfuge to something even more entrenched: genre bias and who the Academy quietly decides doesn't belong at the table at all. Number 6, Marisa Tomei, Best Supporting Actress in 1992. When Marisa Tomei won Best Supporting Actress for My Cousin Vinny, the reaction wasn't applause, it was disbelief. Almost immediately, rumors spread that the Academy had read the wrong name. That alone tells you everything about how comedy performances were viewed at the time. Tomei wasn't just unexpected. She was, in the Academy's eyes, not supposed to be there at all. The backstory matters. Tomei was a relative newcomer, starring in a broad courtroom comedy built around fast dialogue, exaggerated personalities, and cultural misunderstandings. This wasn't prestige drama. This wasn't period costume suffering. It was funny, accessible, and unapologetically commercial. Meanwhile, the category was stacked with respected veterans, most notably Vanessa Redgrave for Howard's End, a film that screamed Oscar in every traditional sense. So why did Tomei win? Timing and clarity. Her performance is laser-focused. From her first scene, you know exactly who Mona Lisa Vito is: her rhythm, her intelligence, and her confidence. She doesn't drift, she doesn't disappear, she lands. Every scene builds to something memorable, and by the time the courtroom climax hits, she's not just comic relief, she's the engine of the story. Audiences remembered her. Voters did too, whether they expected to or not. But historically, this is where the controversy creeps in. The Academy has long struggled with comedy. Funny performances are often treated as easy, even when they require impeccable timing, listening, and control. The argument at the time wasn't that Tomei was bad, it was that she didn't display the kind of difficulty voters were trained to reward. Compared to Redgrave's restrained literary performance, Tomei looked lightweight on paper. Redgrave was widely expected to win. So why didn't she? Vote splitting played a role, but so did complacency. There's a quiet assumption that serious performances will always get their due. Comedy doesn't benefit from that safety net. Ironically, that underestimation may have helped Tomei. She stood out because she wasn't supposed to. So why is this win complicated? The win is complicated because most of the industry still hasn't come to grips with it. The bias against comedy still lingers to this day. Although this performance got rewarded, it still shocked voters simply by being funny. We can only wonder how many others never even entered the conversation. And so we moved from a year where comedy was underestimated to one when popularity, quotability, and cultural catchphrases outweighed craft altogether. Number 7. Cuba Gooding Jr., Best Supporting Actor in 1997. By the time the 1997 Oscar night arrived, Jerry Maguire had already won. Not awards, but culture. The movie dominated conversations, quotes, late night TV, and water cooler talk. And at the center of that wave was Cuba Gooding Jr., delivering one of the most energetic, crowd pleasing performances of the decade. When he won, the room erupted. It felt inevitable. That's exactly the problem. The backstory is simple. Jerry Maguire was a phenomenon. Romantic, funny, emotional, and endlessly rewatchable. Gooding's Rod Tidwell wasn't just a character, he was a slogan. The film's success turned moments into memes before memes existed. In that environment, awards don't just recognize performance, they absorb momentum. And that was why he won. Gooding was electric. He was charismatic, loud, emotional, and completely committed. His performance grabs you immediately, peaks early, and rides that wave all the way through. Audiences loved him. Voters remembered him. On an Oscar ballot, recognition often beats reflection. But this is where craft gets quietly sidelined. That same campaign season, Edward Norton in Primal Fear delivered a performance built on control, transformation, and risk. It unfolds rather than announces itself. And William H. Macy in Fargo, quiet, pathetic, devastating, gave one of the most precise supporting performances of the decade. Neither had catchphrases. Neither exploded off the screen in a single clip, but both stayed with you long after, unlike Gooding's performance in Jerry Maguire, where his performance relies heavily on volume and repetition. Rod Tidwell has a narrow emotional range, and once the character's rhythm is established, it doesn't evolve much. It's effective, but it's not layered. Watching it now, you can feel where the performance stops growing, and where the movie's affection carries it the rest of the way. I enjoy it every time, but enjoyment isn't the same as difficulty. Here, we can see it as the clearest example of the Oscars confusing impact with excellence. Gooding's win isn't offensive. It's revealing. It shows how easily enthusiasm can overpower evaluation and how cultural noise can drown out quieter mastery. And once you see that pattern clearly, it becomes hard not to notice it everywhere else. And the pattern here isn't bad acting. It's convenient storytelling. Across these wins, the Academy isn't consistently choosing the most demanding or lasting performance, it's choosing what fits the moment, what reassures voters, and what aligns with the narrative already circulating in the room. Some performances lose because they're too early, too subtle, too foreign, too funny, or too uncomfortable to reward. And some wins don't mark artistic excellence at all. They mark timing, optics, and consensus. The Oscars don't always tell us who was best. Sometimes they just tell us what the industry needed to believe that year. So if there are any performances you think were undeserving of their awards or any performance you've never gotten over losing, put them in the comments. And if this kind of breakdown is something you want more of, subscribe to this channel as we specialize in breakdowns like this.